John, the NFL is here in style. Amazon begins a new era, and we have Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit as the big gets.
And the TV ratings, highlighted by that great Steelers-Bengals game, well, if you listen to the network spin, they were insane.
Boswell! No good! What is happening here?
And we're back. The Marchand and Oran Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Oran.
John Arad,
the Sports Business Journal media reporter. And this week, big get, really big. Al Michaels, probably the greatest NFL TV play-by-player of all time, and Kirk Herbstreit, who is the voice of college football. They're joining forces. Amazon making history with their exclusive Thursday night package, beginning with the Chiefs and the Chargers. So we'll have that. Remember, you can go back and listen last 2 weeks, some nice, really fun big gets. Last week, Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson. 2 weeks ago, we had Joe Buck and Troy Aikman.
You know, Andrew, a friend of the show, Chris Finnegan, he used to do PR for Discovery. He's been pitching me on this idea that we should have a segment devoted on how to pronounce our names. And so we always have, Russo at the beginning with my name. That always just makes me laugh. All right, that's great. But last week, Pat McAfee, how can you butcher Marchand? It's such an easy name. Let's listen to it.
I haven't talked to the Omaha folks since this has been announced last night at 11 p.m. Thanks, Marchand.
Yeah,
Christ. I mean, at least give me the morning. I mean, Jesus Christ, at 11 p.m. Yeah. I mean, how am I supposed to sleep, Marchand, whenever you're not. When you light up my phone at 11 p.m.? I mean, do you care about my well-being? Nope. You don't. No. I mean, it was obviously massive news. I'm honored to have the news broke.
That, of course, was after your story breaking the news that that McAfee was heading over to College Game Day as a regular panelist.
Yeah, and the thing for Pat, too, you think I wanted to do that at 10:30 at night? He tweeted out that he had a big announcement, so I started making some calls and found out, which I had heard about, that they had been talks, but it came together quickly. We'll talk about McAfee and ESPN and Game Day and now the wars in terms of the college football pre-games between Fox and ESPN a little bit.
I do love Marchand, though. It sounds very French to me, Marchand.
It does. It does. Brad Marchand, who's now Brad Marchand, he changed it. He was Marchand. Now he's Marchand. I'm actually, anybody cares, nobody does probably, it's Marchand. It's Marchand. All right, let's go.
We're losing the listeners as we speak. I can see them going. Our ratings are tanking, Andrew. Let's get to who's up, who's down. Come on.
Sounds good. Who's up, who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, I'm going to start us off, Andrew. Who's up? Jimmy Pitaro. What a weekend for him. ESPN has always been important to Disney. It's always been important to Bob Chapek. But over the weekend, there was a sort of a D23. It was it's sort of a fan event. And Bob Chapek gave a ton of interviews. And you want to talk about a vote of confidence. He talked about ESPN and Jimmy Pitaro in such ways that they're going to be instrumental to Disney's growth over the next several years. And it was, if I'm Jimmy Pitaro, I'm a little bit nervous because he's putting a lot on my back. But that must have been a very nice public vote of confidence, because I know that privately he's been getting a lot of votes of confidence within Burbank.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Pitaro has a new contract. I think his contract's up shortly, and I wouldn't be surprised another 3-year deal or what. I'm not sure the length, but that Pitaro has a new contract. All right, my who's up? Fox Sports' Urban Meyer. Now, Fox did all they could do to not really make a big deal that Urban Meyer was coming back to be on Big Noon Kickoff. Of course, he had so many difficulties and so many bad stories for his short time as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the thing is, he's a really good analyst. He is very good how Fox utilizes him on the Big Noon Kickoff. They were in Austin for Alabama and Texas. And this was what he talked about pregame. And the subject was how to block superior athletes for Texas against Alabama, who has basically usually the best defensive players in the country.
Coach, how do you slow down a potent defensive line like that?
Are you ready?
Yep.
You don't block them.
What?
Don't block them. Now, I came to the SEC of Florida, me and my staff, we came from the Mountain West Conference. The speed, athleticism, just the size of these big men, the way they ran, it darn near takes your breath away when you first time you see that. And so as we became educated in the Southeastern Conference, a hard education the first few games, we started to develop a plan. And the plan was this: you have 10 plays on your call sheet where you do not block the D lineman. You know why? Why get in a fight you can't win?
John, what I like about that is just it's inside stuff. And then you didn't hear this, of course, but they showed video of what he meant. And that's exquisite television. That's how you do it. Well planned. And they use Meyer the way you want to use him. He talks like a coach, but they make it simple. And it's inside information, because the idea that Urban Meyer would say, well, you go in Alabama and you have about 10 plays where you don't block them because your athletes are inferior, is just good stuff that you don't really hear many other places.
Why don't you take us right into who's down, Andrew?
All right, my who's down, NBC's Jack Collinsworth and Maria Taylor. My first, Jack Collinsworth, Notre Dame. He's the new play-by-player, 27 years old, replacing Mike Tirico, who's, of course, a top 10 play-by-player. So big shoes to fill. And here's the thing about Collinsworth. The fact that his name is Collinsworth and, presumably that helped him get this job, that doesn't bother me, right? If you're up to the gig, then that's fine. I think it's actually a lot of ways, people will point to nepotism, but it's also helpful to grow up around broadcasting and to understand what it takes. The issue I had listening was the lack of command. Now, he wasn't terrible, but it just didn't feel like this is the big leagues. It's Notre Dame, it's NBC, and he didn't hit those big calls. Marshall had the upset. There weren't enough stories about Marshall and what this meant for them. And it just lacked that level that you need to be at. Maybe he'll get better. Hopefully he will. He's good on, during Football Night in America as a reporter / host. So that was one. Now, staying with Football Night in America, this was not good. Maria Taylor, who I've been very high on air, this is what she said during halftime of the Cowboys and the Bucs.
2 sacks for Micah Parsons so far in this one, but still the Cowboys find themselves down 3-12 to Tampa Bay at home.
Now, look, like I said, I like Maria Taylor's work overall, but that's just not the vernacular, right? 3-12. That's not how you talk about it. So that was just surprising to hear that. So kind of a poor weekend for NBC, first on Saturday with Collinsworth, and then the flub by Maria Taylor on Football Night in America.
Andrew, my who's down, there were so many different ones to pick from. I mean, week 1 of the NFL brought them out. I got an email from Tim of Shelbyville, Tennessee. Tim, and the next time, give me your last name. I like to put the last name there, but he wanted a thumbs down to ESPN's baseball scheduler. That would be Rick Mace over at ESPN for what he said, quote, waving the white flag to the NFL and making a meaningless Cubs-Giants game Sunday night baseball last night. They go through it. Of course, Sunday night baseball was going against the Cowboys versus Brady. There are lots of reasons for why they're doing it. And a shout out to Rick Mace because ratings are up for Sunday Night Baseball, and he's doing a pretty nice job with the scheduling. So Rick, you were in the running, but you are not the who's down. Friend of the podcast, Jonathan Tannenwald, he wanted us to do Comcast because he couldn't watch. They still don't have a deal with the NFL. He couldn't watch the Red Zone channel outside of his house. He was upset by that. So Brian Roberts in the running for who's down as well.
There's a lot of intrigue into this. Is who's down? Who are we going to get to?
Who's it going to get? Charlie Ergen, always a who's down with my sources, but Sling TV was having lots of problems during week 1.
Charlie Ergen's the head of Sling TV.
He's the head of Echo Star, which runs Sling TV. He said, let's go straight to the top and get Charlie. Rob Thune at DirecTV. How many people? You had problems with Sunday Ticket, didn't you, over there as well? NFL Plus, the NFL app. I mean, let's put Brian Rolap as our who's down. Although he doesn't listen to us, so we'll go to Hans Schroeder. But Andrew, I'm going to surprise you here because I did not put this on the rundown, and it's maybe it's a bit of megalomania, but who's down is John Orant.
Wow!
And I'm going to tell you one of the things about this pod is that we come out and we give opinions a lot more than we write the opinion. And the struggle is when you give an opinion, you don't want to get cemented into that opinion. You still want to report, and you still want to see what's happening and whether or not that opinion should change. And one of the first opinions on one of the first podcasts that we did was about when is ESPN going to take its mothership and go direct to consumer with the regular ESPN channel. You gave the over under at 5 years, and I took the over. You took the under. Right now, we're still at 4 years. I'm telling you right now, the over under is at 2 years. It's not going to be 4 years. It's going to be well before that. The signs have been pointing to that for a while, and it's time for me to finally acknowledge. I should have acknowledged this about probably 1 or 2 months ago. I probably should have acknowledged this when we had Steve Bornstein on as our big get, but something is happening there, and it seems to be going very, very quickly. And I am retreating as fast as I can from that position. It's happening before 4 years.
Welcome to the dark side.
But my new over-under, Andrew, 2 years. Over-under.
You say 2. You know what? I actually have some information on that as well. Let's just do it now. We're going to do topics, but I actually think it's 3 years. All right. So we were 5 when we started. So 4 would be where the bet was at. I think it's 3 years. And I think the number is 50 million when they go under 50 million. Now we had Michael Nathanson, one of the best analysts in the business from MoffettNathanson, who said he thinks it's going to level out at 50, 60 million in terms of cable subscribers. I think ESPN, I think internally and Disney might think that's going to come a little bit quicker, like you're pointing to. And so I think 50 million is where they flip that switch, and it's coming. And I agree with you. Let's make it clear, because people do get this wrong sometimes, is that it's still going to be on cable. It's still going to be on satellite. You'll just be able to buy it direct to consumer. But here's the most important thing, John. First off, you mentioned about everyone in the industry in terms of like who is possibly going to be a who's down. So the podcast is about 3 hours now. That's number one. Number 2, you're a very big man, though. Takes a big man to admit a mistake. Now, do I get my dinner now that we bet, or we have to wait till it actually happens?
I don't recall what the actual bet was, Andrew.
The bet was I get to pick whatever.
No, I can't recall. I will tell you one thing, though. I don't think that it really has anything to do with the number of subscribers, 50 million, 60 million. Cord cutting is happening. They're seeing cord cutting happening. As soon as they buy Comcast out from Hulu, Comcast still owns 33% of it, then they're going to be able to come to the market with a streamed bundle that would include ABC, every single ESPN net, every single Disney net, and ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, Hulu, and they're going to be able to come with a gigantic package. I think that the number of subscribers to cable is immaterial to them now. I think that they've already made that decision, and it's good. Like if the number is 50 million and they're at 57 million, they're still going to go.
John, let's just take it right into the topics. We're going to move ESPN now to the number one topic. Breaking news is huge revelation. Let's just do everything ESPN. Just give me your further thoughts now that you've made this great declaration. There's a lot to talk about. We have McAfee going to game day with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman and Monday Night Football. We have Peyton Manning and Eli Manning cast. They have a double header this week in week 2, which is big. Where do you want to go next?
And before we do that, do I pick dinner or do you pick dinner? Are we going to Taco Bell or are we going to go to a fine?
No, I pick the place. I pick the place, and you see if you can expense it. We have to see, like our buddy at TV Sports Ratings, who jumped in on Twitter. He got in there. He still thinks above 5 years. Will he come to the dark side? I think
he's not coming. I had a little off the record talk with him. I think he's going to stick publicly with the 5 years, which is now 4 years, if not longer.
All right. So he could still win if he's right. He could still get a dinner from us. But yeah, I get to pick the place.
So look, JPEG, I encourage people to read. He gave interviews. I almost said exclusive interviews, but he gave interviews to the Financial Times, to the Wall Street Journal, to a Variety, to the New York Times, a lot of different areas. And what he talked about with ESPN is putting it back on a growth mode. He was very open about getting into gambling in a bigger way. I mean, they're working on a gambling app. I mean, again, that kind of made me laugh because ESPN has been into gambling. It's been taking gambling advertising. It's been, doing a lot of things with gambling. But this is much further along those lines. And I think that if you take a look at what Apple's strategy is and what Amazon's strategy is, and one of the benefits that they bring in a streaming world is that they're international and they can go international. Well, ESPN Plus can go international, as too can Paramount Plus or Peacock. And so when they buy a lot of these rights, they have the international rights to them as well. So I think that that's another area where they see a lot of potential growth, taking this big American sports brand of ESPN and taking it international. So I think there are a lot of real big business cases that JPEG is sort of, hanging his hat on with ESPN.
Well, that's the beauty of subscription. We talk about this because you guys, Sports Business Journal, subscription service, newspaper, subscription service. Subscription's been going on forever. Like people act like digital, like the Athletic created subscription or something. That's been happening forever. The thing the Athletic figured out, and I don't know if they figured it out, but they got sold for $550 million to the New York Times, is that when you're selling to the world, that's a huge market. So the idea that, well, no, nobody wants to buy this. Yeah, that's true. But if 1 out of 10 people, when you're going to a market that's 2 billion or how many people are in the world, that's a huge market. So that makes sense on the ESPN side. Here's another thing, a little nugget about ESPN, I think. The idea that they're going to be spun off. I think Chapek might have said this, but I heard this as well. That's not going to happen. Even though,
by the way, I can interrupt you for a second. It was never going to happen. He just once it came out and said, yeah, we're not spinning anything off.
Well, it just doesn't really make sense when you really break it down in terms of what it would do for the business, right? The only thing is there's like a debt thing that's way too complicated for me to explain in general, especially not to bore people on a pod because I don't even understand. But there's a debt thing you could do. Someone told me about. But besides that, it doesn't really make any sense. And why wouldn't you want the power of ESPN, to bundle it all together? All right. Are we done on the business side, or is there anything else you want to mention? I got one more business thing.
Oh, one more business thing. Go
ahead.
Yeah,
a little nugget. I think this is interesting for our college football fans. I think the Pac-12 and ESPN, hundreds of millions of dollars apart. They are not even close. So that is going to be interesting where that goes in terms of negotiations and will teams jump? Because when you're that far apart, that means something has to happen. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't have information on this, but something just maybe a little conjecture. Do one of the digital players get involved with the Pac-12, right? Apple, for example, loves to buy everything and then sell subscriptions. And they did that with the MLS. The Pac-12 just had this problem of not being, with the Pac-12 network, and you couldn't find it. And it's, obviously not as successful as the ones that partnered with Fox or ESPN. But money talks. And if Apple can make the case that we're going to pay you, we're going to bundle the Pac-12 and they can get the money that they're looking for, maybe they come into the picture. But right now, the issue for the Pac-12 and perhaps the Big 12 as well is just leverage. Right. They've already spent a lot of money. So I think that doesn't mean a deal won't happen, but they're going to somehow have to strengthen their hand. If you're both, especially the Pac-12, I think the Big 12 has already expanded a little bit. And I think they could try to pick off some Pac-12 teams. So that is something to watch for our college football fans out there.
Yeah, I would be absolutely, I want to upgrade shocked. Gobsmacked. Is that more than shocked? I would be gobsmacked if ESPN doesn't find out a way to do a deal with the Pac-12. But when you bring up Amazon and you bring up Apple and Google sitting there as well, that's not insubstantial. Like you're sitting in New York and I'm in DC. We do have an East Coast bias here, and because that's all that we're consuming. Amazon is with the University of Washington. Apple is right there with Cal and Stanford. Like these are people that work for these companies. These are companies that are in Pac-12 country. Would they want a Pac-12 that doesn't have UCLA and USC? I would think so. I think that is a pretty good bet as well. That there's going to be some sort of package that the Pac-12 will create for those streamers.
And Apple wants it all, though. Like that's what they're trying to do, and then sell those subscriptions. So it might make some sense. Does it work? I don't know about that. That's the.
Can I quote the former mayor of Washington D.C., Marion Barry?
Sure.
People in hell want ice water.
Okay, there you go. There you go. You love hearing that DC in there. All right, let's move on. Let's just do a couple of ESPN things. This weekend, they're in Boone, North Carolina. We talk about that with Kirk Herbstreit in the interview in the Big Get coming up in a little bit. They add Pat McAfee. First off, I have to apologize to you because first rule of the podcast is to break all news either Monday or Tuesday. So we have it in the podcast Wednesday night. Breaking news story. Bad job by me. Apologize for that. McAfee, he said his thing, but you think at 10:30 at night, you think I really wanted to do that? No, Pat, I did not. I would have loved to have done it on Monday morning at 10 o'clock.
Marchand with the break.
But McAfee, look, I think it's a good addition. You want to be in business with Pat McAfee, is that a long-term play for ESPN? I'm not sure. McAfee kind of moves around a lot. He goes from job to job, but he brings energy to that show. It's a different type of thing, but like you imagine him in Boone, North Carolina this weekend, that's going to be a riot. And he's going to be in the middle of it. And he's like the perfect guy for that. So I think it's a good addition for ESPN, and McAfee said it's a dream come true for him. So I do like that move.
Have you attended a WWE event at all recently?
I have not. They've invited me. It's very nice. They invite me a lot. I'm not, when I was a kid, I liked wrestling, but
Yeah, I mean, with neither of us, I don't want to pretend like I'm a wrestling fan. Neither of us are, but I did go to one in Philly, and to watch McAfee interact with that crowd on a Friday night was, I can just imagine him in Boone with the App State fans going crazy. It's going to be fun TV.
ESPN, you gave them your who's up. They're on an upswing. It's Monday Night Football. This week they have the doubleheader with the one game on ESPN, which will have Steve Levy, Louis Riddick, and their new member Dan Orlovsky, and then Buck and Aikman on the late game on ABC. Vikings and Eagles. The first game's Tennessee and Buffalo, which is pretty good game as well. So they're on an upswing. Monday Night Football, first Monday, it felt bigger, right? You had Troy and Joe on the main cast. Then you had the Mannings doing their thing on ESPN2. That's a lot of star power. Now, I get it. I've written this. I gave Darren Ravel, I did a little dedication to Darren Ravel on Twitter because I wrote that they are making more than $50 million combined, the Mannings and Aikman and Buck. So just like I like to sometimes score tweets out of Ravel's. I'd say that's like a 4.1 out of a 5 Ravel tweet for me. But the point being is that they spent a lot of money, but it felt big. And that's really important. If you're ESPN and Monday Night Football, and there's an aura more to it than it was. Do you agree with that? And what was your take?
My take on that is the text messages that I got from people that are not in the business, old friends of mine that just said the same thing. It just felt bigger. It felt like a big game. One person said, I don't want to shout out any of these guys are texting late at night, but it felt like if there weren't ESPN graphics on the screen, it would have felt like a Fox 425 game from the past, 2 decades. And I think that's big as well. I watched most of the game on ESPN2. I love the Manning cast. I love everything about the Manning cast. And I forgot actually how much I enjoyed it. They had Joel McHale on. My Twitter feed was killing that segment. A lot of people don't like the guests. It was so uncomfortable watching it, and I love that. I mean, the Mannings invite that on themselves. If I want to watch a game and I want people to dissect the game, I have a Hall of Fame 3-time Super Bowl winning quarterback on ESPN. I can go there. I want to be entertained and watch a game as I would at a bar. I love the guests. I especially love when the guests make Peyton and Eli less so, but Peyton uncomfortable, and he did seem uncomfortable with Joel McHale. And I thought everything about it was as good as last year. And I think I will be personally watching the Manning cast on Monday Night Football this season again, despite Joe and Troy being in the booth.
Yeah, the thing they're going to have to figure out is how to make people aware of which weeks they're on, right? They're not on this week. They're on week 3. They're back on. That's one thing. The other aspect that I think Yeah, I think the guest, it's catch-22 with the guest, right? Because when you have a good game, you don't really want the guest as much. They had Shannon Sharp, but not a great connection, which is also an issue they're going to have to sort of figure out, because you want these people on, but when the Zooms aren't really connected, yeah, I get the appeal of it kind of being like a mystery science. Was it Mystery Science? Was it Mystery Science 3000?
Mystery Science Theater, I think it was 2000, wasn't it? I think
3000. Anyway, my bad for bringing that up without even knowing what the was. Anywho, the guest, if it's a blowout, yeah, you want the guest, not a blowout close game. I want to hear Peyton. Peyton, again, like I've been covered a lot of athletes very closely, especially in baseball. And, the best players, I always say this, are kind of dorks in some respects, right? I mean that as a compliment. They're not, yes, they're the big men on campus, but like they're so into their sport, just as like someone who gets A+ are into math. And watching Peyton like watch a game, he's so intense. Like the timeout that Seattle didn't take at the end.
That was worth watching the Manning cast by itself. Like he was just incredulous.
He's going nuts with the timeout.
And when he finally figured out that they were going to kick the field goal, the look of just utter disgust on his face, he couldn't hide. I mean, it was fantastic TV, I thought. I loved it.
8 levels of like his head. They make fun of his forehead, but that head needs a lot of space because there's like 8 levels of football knowledge that's going on at once. It's really incredible to watch. And so, yeah, they Monday Night Football is back. All right, I think we've given ESPN their due with a lot of time on them, but this is a historic show because you've come to the dark side.
One more over-under before we go to the next one. Wednesday morning, over-under of the time Chris LaPlaca sends us the email, ESPN Top Flack. Over 9:30.
I don't want to encourage others to do this, but he sometimes gives a review. Chris LaPlaca, who's the head of ESPN's PR, he oftentimes, almost every week, gives us a review of the pod, ups and downs. Generally speaking, he gets a couple of things right.
A couple of things. All
right, let's move to Amazon. We're going to do a lot of Amazon in a moment with Kirk and Al with the interview with the Big Get. But this is an historic Thursday night. Some people listen before Thursday night. Some people probably listening to this podcast after Thursday night. I wrote a feature that's 2,000 words. I went down to Houston for their first exhibition game, and Amazon was nice enough to give me a lot of behind the scenes access. And I was nice enough to write my first story was about how Al Michaels was going to go to other places, like, ESPN and Fox maybe, which, you're welcome, Amazon. But this story, 2,000 words, I think, they probably like this one better, very showing, I think, what their plan is and what they're trying to do. It's the new frontier. The question that will be answered by some of you already know this is, can you make it work? This is the biggest streaming live event in the history of streaming. There's no other streaming event has ever, we're going by the idea that they're going to get at least 7-8 million people. And I think Amazon, again, people will know this. Some people will notice when they're listening to this. I think they'll probably be able to withhold it, but that's the most important thing. My story, I focus on Jay Marine and all what they call Amazonians. Jay Marine is the head of sports, basically, with Marie Donahue, who did the NFL TV negotiations. And can they get that back, the backroom stuff correct? And so it gets to your place, because I do think they hit it a pretty good home run with Frank Godelli being the producer from Sunday Night, Al Michaels, and Kirk Herbstreit.
Yeah, look, the game production is going to be top quality. It's going to be Sunday Night Football quality. It's going to look and feel like it can host. Amazon is going to look and feel like they can host a Super Bowl or a championship game with no problem. The one thing that I'm going to look for, and especially coming after week 1, when everybody was having such troubles with Sunday Ticket and with NFL Red Zone, is whether or not it's going to be able to handle it. Because one of the things that all of the terrestrial TV executives have said is like that it's hard for streamers to adequately get big audiences, and this is going to be a big audience. The Super Bowl also streams to a big audience as well. So there have been tests here and there. Amazon insists they can get it. I expect that they will.
Look, again, people will know. Some people are listening to this and they're like, yeah, it worked, or whatever happened with it. Here's a little nugget from my story: is that Super Bowls, this is according to Fred Goodell, you have 36, 37 cameras. Amazon's going to have 29 for every game. That's opposed to Sunday Night Football, I think is like 24, 25. And then they're going to have 2 Sky Cams. Nobody else has 2 Sky Cams. At the Super Bowls, you have 2 Sky Cams. So they've really invested in making it look good. If you look at the job that their top executives, led by Marie Donahue and then her right-hand man, Jared Stacy, have done in terms of putting this together, they what Amazon does is they make you comfortable, right? They went from selling books to e-commerce to now almost everyone has a Amazon package on their doorstep. They had you read books like normally, then you had Kindles. Again, I still read a book, even though it takes me forever, as you know. I'm still reading that Trip Mickle book.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I actually have another book. I don't really finish books. I don't know. But anyways, the point is that the question is, will I finish the Trip Mickle book?
Too. We have the Trip Mickle book as my background fodder right there.
Yes. The question is, will I finish the Trip Mickle book before ESPN Mothership goes direct to consumer? I would take ESPN the Mothership. I don't know. I'm doing my best. I have another book too I'm reading about breathing. So I got a couple of books going, and you got to watch 18,000 hours of television. All right, somebody's got to do it. So when you look at where they're going, though, that I think they got the product is going to be fine. It's just, will they, over the long term, be able to deliver that where it's good? And this is the thing about the Bezos plant. It's long term. They dink and doink you to death for 10 years. Talk to me in a decade, and that's where the big talk is when the next deals come up. Is Amazon in position to go for Monday Night Football, or to get a Super Bowl, or to get more playoff games?
This is what's so unique about Amazon, and it's why I struggle with Amazon, is because they're approaching this. They're approaching live video so differently than these linear TV networks whose entire existence depend on live video. I mean, you just talked about Fred Goodell's plan. That costs a ton. They're getting less than any other network in terms of ad rates. They're going to get the ratings are going to be down. They already increased the price of the cost of Prime based on the actual package itself. Like, at some point, Amazon's on the stock market. It's a for-profit company. At some point, they're going to have to start making money. But the way that they're starting this and spending money, it's great for you and me because the production is going to be sublime.
All right, so that's a big story. ESPN, Amazon, NFL. You said at the top, the ratings, everyone was crowing. So it seemed like they were good this weekend. What did you think about that?
Oh, the ratings were great. The weather on the East Coast and Chicago was poor, so people stayed in. That always helps the ratings come out. I think long term, over the course of the season, Dallas not being good, potentially. The Thursday Night Football moving from a broadcast network to Amazon. Expect a pretty significant ratings drop or viewership drop this season for the NFL. But I honestly, who cares? They're the biggest thing in town. Nothing else is going to touch them. When we come out with our top 100 shows of the year, which SBJ does every year, the NFL is going to take up probably 70, 80% of it.
All right. A couple other big stories. The Fox new booth, Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson in New York. We had the Giant game on, so I only got to see some of it through Red Zone. What I heard sounded good. Like, I listened to them last year and I did like them. And so, I would have actually, if they were on, I probably would have done a full review on their first broadcast, but they're going to be doing the Super Bowl. Did you get that game? Did you catch that or no?
I was also doing Red Zone as well. So I got in and out of them. They sounded like they sounded last year. I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing. Nance and Romo, that's a team to follow up. Nance had struggled in the first half, got a couple of names wrong. You don't really expect that from Jim Nance in terms of he was calling Justin Reed, Eric Reed, who was kicking, which was a kind of a big story. And just there, we'll see if those two mesh this year after struggling last year.
And Andrew, we got to talk about Chris Collinsworth. I mean,
oh yeah,
Drink some warm tea, man. Come on.
Yeah, that was a struggle. Hopefully he's okay and good for this Sunday. Obviously with everything that's going on, you don't know what illnesses people have these days, and we're not going to speculate on anything, of course. But yeah, that was a tough listen. And Tirico brought up the fact that they did a Thursday game and a Sunday game. Again, I covered baseball, so I don't know if that's I can't really give, we later in a minute, we're going to like Herbstreit and Michaels, and I didn't say it because it didn't fit in, but we started talking about Herbstreit's schedule. It's like, all right, cry me a river. 18 inning game at Wrigley Field, at night game at Sunday Night Baseball, gets done at like 3, flight at like 6 a.m, day game in Cincinnati next day. So cry me a river.
Corporate plane, helicopter into Boone.
Exactly. All right, John.
John, joining us now, Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. They barely need an introduction, but I've called Michaels probably the greatest NFL TV play-by-player of all time, while Kirk Herbstreit is the biggest voice in college football. Now they're joining forces for history. Amazon Prime Videos, the new home for exclusive coverage of Thursday Night Football. Opening night, Chiefs and Chargers, big one to start with.
You forgot the biggest honor. Andrew, you forgot the biggest honor. Al is now, you joined Greg Olson, Al, as the second repeat visitor to the Marchand and Moran Sports Media podcast. Congratulations.
Do I get a prize?
It's in the mail.
Does it come with like a Mercedes 450E or what?
Of course.
John will be handling that. Well, let's go into your guys' history a little bit. Kirk, I think people know this about you. Obviously, college football, the NFL, but you're a huge baseball fan, huge Cincinnati Reds fan. Al was the play-by-play guy for the Reds back early 70s. I think you're a little too young before to have seen him when he was doing games before Marty Brennaman took over after Al left to go on to national, do fully national stuff. But just that connection, with baseball and everything, how has that helped you guys, as you've gotten to know each other better?
Honestly, I think we have a lot in common because of our love for sports, not just games that Al's done. He's done so many huge games in different sports. But I think we just, we'll sit around at a table and we'll have other people with us that are on our crew, and we're all kind of reminiscing and talking about different games, and could be talking about horses, could be talking about baseball, football. I think it's just a passion for sports in general that is initially our kind of a common bond that we have. And of course, I'm a guy who grew up in my generation. I am a huge consumer of sports, and Al seems like most of the big events that I watched, or a large portion of them, Al was calling them. And so for me to sit there, I'm just kind of like a little kid listening to Al tell firsthand stories about some of these events. So I think that's been our initial, probably times we've had dinner, probably been the best thing for us to kind of sit down. And Reds baseball, by the way, has been right in the middle of a lot of that.
100%. Now, in terms of creating chemistry, I don't know if you create it, Al. You've had many partners over the years, and Kirk, what have you guys tried to do so you mesh, and this broadcast is smooth from the go and throughout this season?
Number one, Andrew, Kirk was listening to me do the Reds games in his bassinet. I did 3 years, and then Marty Brennaman did the next 46. Saw Marty recently, and he loves retirement. I think one of the keys is, and Kirk touched upon it, we sat and had dinner the night before we did the preseason game in Houston a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that came up was horse racing. And we started to talk about the Kentucky Derby and all of that, which led me to, at one point during that game, talk about the fact that hope springs eternal in preseason. You begin to listen to, how optimistic the teams are and the coaches are and all of that. And I likened it to when you would be around Wayne Lucas, the great horse trainer, and he could get you to bet on Mr. Ed in the Kentucky Derby, which of course was a byproduct of our dinner the night before when Kirk was telling me about how he almost threw his tickets away the year that the horse that he had was finishing, was moved up from second to first, but he's on the ground, trying to, pick up these wet tickets to take them and cash them in. Anyway, so I think a lot of that has to do with it's a byproduct of getting together off the air. And we've had a time now to spend, a few dinners together and a couple of, a big seminar at Amazon in Culver City. But I think the key thing is to, and it's going to evolve through the season. And also the good thing for me too is, I tell so many stories, but I'm bringing in a new audience, which is great because I'm telling the same stories over and over and over and over, but I'm bringing in a new group. So in that sense, it's great to have Kirk as a partner. And I thought, for an opening salvo, that felt really comfortable that night.
And I would just add to that. I think Al's very welcoming. I'm not just saying that because he's on here, because I didn't know what to expect. I like everybody else, had watched Al, and if we weren't doing broadcasting and we were just met, he's just a great person. He's just a very easy guy to talk with. And I think when you have that innately, then when you do hang around each other, and I agree with that. I think going to dinners and chemistry is everything in a booth. And I think it allows you then to just be able to carry over that into the booth. And now you just happen to be talking about a football game for 3.5 or 4 hours, and away we go. So I think there's it's one thing to do your job, but it's another thing to come together and do it in a very seamless kind of feel, more of a comfortable listen. And I think Al's had that with his partners. I try to have that with the people that I've worked with, and hopefully we can come together and as an entire unit, not just Al and I, our whole team coming together and give people that kind of vibe.
I mean, Al, I'm not overstepping here. I mean, you're certainly the GOAT of NFL play-by-play announcers. I mean, you've done Monday Night Football when it was the top primetime telecast, I think starting in 85, right? And
86.
And then you transitioned over to Sunday Night Football when that became the top broadcast property. So from the mid 80s through now 2022, you've been calling the biggest games. Of course, going to Amazon, like one of the biggest stories that Andrew and I have been covering is just the idea of everything going exclusively to a streamer. How is this different for you?
Well, it's different in the sense that it's a new frontier, it's a new platform. But I've got to put that off to the side a little bit, John, because we are there to do the game. So I've been doing the NFL for 36 seasons. This is 37. And I'm not going to reinvent a new template or anything of that sort. I'm going to go about the job pretty much the way I've done it. Now, can you make it better? Can you tweak it? Yeah. And believe me, I'm always looking for maybe a better way to do something. The technology has gotten to the point where it's fantastic. You have to blend with the technology and stay abreast of what's going on. I think one of the key things too, John, is being in sync with the production crew. One of the great things for me through the years is working with a lot of the same people. So I know how our tape operators go about their job. I know how the audio people go about their job. And that's a very, very comforting feeling. But I think in this particular instance, is this the future? Yes, to a degree. I mean, is it the entire future of sports on television? I don't think I'll be around doing this in 12 or 13 years to find out the answer to that. So I don't know. I can't predict what's going to happen. I think it is part of the future for sure. And I think also one of the great things for us, especially considering what took place on Sunday, is we knew we had Chargers, Kansas City to begin things. And now it turns out to be that's probably as good a matchup as there is in week 2, with Mahomes going against Herbert and two teams coming off wins. So we got really lucky. This is a great way to jump off the springboard and into the pool, and away we go. But in terms of what's going to happen down the line, that's for others to figure out.
It's good to see how that you finally caught a break in the business.
Yes, you're right. I just hope, look, we came down the stretch last year. Of all the regular season games I've ever done, I think the Charger Raider game at the end of last season was as dramatic and exciting considering what was taking place and the possibility of a tie and all of that. and then we had 3 tremendous playoff games, including the Super Bowl. So I've had a rabbit's foot for a lot of years dangling from my belt loop.
Kirk, the LA Times had a story over the summer that detailed an off-season health scare that you had involving blood clots. How was your health?
It's great. I had a scare. I can't remember. It's been a few months now when that happened, but I got immediately put on blood thinners, and my body has responded favorably. Thank goodness. But yeah, I'm great. I don't have any restrictions of any kind, and I feel probably the best I've felt in a long time.
Your travel schedule is going to be insane. Going from college on Saturdays to the NFL on Thursdays, and wherever in between. How are you going to be able to manage that? How do you plan to manage that?
I think it's just being, and Al's throughout his career has probably done things like this. I think it's just trying to be able to keep things organized. Like I'm calling this week. I've got looking forward to working with Al and the crew for our first game on Thursday, and then. While I'm preparing for that, I've got to find some time because I got Mario Cristobal and Jimbo Fisher in Miami of Florida going to Kyle Field and College Station. So I've got to, it's not like I can just start on Friday getting ready for that game. And by the way, I'm going to mix in a 3-hour college game day in Boone, North Carolina, because Appalachian State is become a unique story. So that'll be a wild scene for 3 hours there. So yeah, this is an interesting week. I mean, of all the weeks that we start this week, sometimes we do these game days where they're a little bit off the beaten path. And I think Boone, North Carolina would fit that billing. So what better way than a wild card week to get me started? But I'm going to stay organized. I have a sickness about loving what I do, and it sounds like a lot, but I'm going to manage it, and I'm going to look forward to the challenge.
Have you been to Boone before?
Never have. I heard great things. Mac Brown always tells me about how beautiful it is up there. I've never been there. Have you been there?
No, but Michael Smith, who does college football for SBJ, is a proud Boone alum, App State alum.
Okay.
So he's been insufferable this season.
I don't know, Al, over all your travels, if you made it over there, but I hear great things about it. I hear it's up in the mountains, and heard it's beautiful, but I heard it's also hard to get to. So.
Which airport do you fly into for starters?
Boone International, I'm assuming, right?
They said the closest FBO is like 130 miles away. So that's going to be the first. That's the first challenge is I'll leave you Thursday night and fly, and I still am 130 miles away from where I'm trying to get. So
I think there's a chopper in your future. What do you think?
Right. This week, that would help. Yeah. Although in those mountains, I don't know if in the dark, at 1 a.m, I don't know if I want
that. Baby. No, thanks.
Kirk, how good do you think you and Al can be?
How good can we be?
Yeah.
Well, you and I visited with Al in Houston. I mean, I want to be as good as there is. Like, I don't think we're putting this team together to try to, work out the kinks and maybe get there by the, middle of the year. Al was the greatest to ever do it. I like to think that I have a feel for it. Our production team is, I think, the best in the industry. We're getting, great games. I mean, there's a lot there to pull together, and everybody takes this job very seriously. Everybody wants to be great. I like to think, and I think Al would probably agree, we want to be as good as there is out there. Who's the judge? Who's to say who's the best at whatever? But we just want to be the best version of ourselves. And I think there's a chance we can be pretty good at this.
What do you think, Al?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not in the business of rating us against anybody else. I have great respect for our brethren. Buck and Aikman have done it for years, and Nance and Romo are terrific. So I don't want to be judged against them, but as Kirk says, the best version of ourselves. It's as simple as that. We both have a love for what we do. We're immersed in preparing and making sure we get everything locked down. We've got a tremendous production crew, and Fred Godelli, as a producer, doesn't need an introduction in that end of the business. I mean, he's produced the #1 show on television for the last 11 years. Enough said there. Our director, Pierre Moussa, is terrific. We have a lot of the people that were part of our production crew on Sunday night who have come over and will either work both games, Thursday and Sunday, or just want to have their weekends off and work Thursday only. So I think we're ready to go. And I think, that was just a great feeling in Houston that night after the game, because we're coming out of the blocks. We had done a practice game in Los Angeles a few days before, but it just felt right. So how good can we be? I think we can be great. But it's in the eyes of, the listener. As long as we can make it comfortable and informative and entertaining, and the lyrics match the melody, as I always say, things will be fine.
Al, on Sunday, the Cowboys played against Tampa, and you weren't there for NBC, and you'd been there for a long time, Monday Night Football. I presume you watched the game, and I think you still want to do NBC. Like, what's the feeling towards that in terms of the idea of not being at NBC in terms of doing Sunday nights?
Well, that was a plan that they had for a while. And I don't want to make any headlines via clickbait, Andrew. So, yeah, the story as well as anybody. My contract ran out, and that was the end of that. They did sign me to an emeritus deal, which includes doing a wild card game at the end of this season, and I suppose in the future, and maybe some other assignments involving events that I'm interested in. Could be maybe something to do with the Paris Olympics. I know the U.S. Open in golf is 4 miles or 5 miles away, so there's a chance that I'll be a part of that coverage. But certainly I understood. I could see the end of the trail coming, and then the Amazon thing popped up, and I still have great passion and love for what I do. I still get excited when I walk into a stadium, and I did want to continue, and this afforded me the opportunity to do just that.
And then when I was in Houston, we spoke, we talked about Bob Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, chairman of the NFL TV committee. He called Fox, he called ESPN on your behalf. And my question for you here is, when that happened, you're Al Michaels, right? Like, your resume speaks for itself. Do you want Kraft to call there, or is that just one of those things where, he looks at the opportunities, Monday Night Football, if Joe Buck doesn't go there, Fox has 2 of the next 3 Super Bowls. How does that happen? What happens there?
I wasn't a party to what was taking place off on the side. I do know that, in the National Football League, they're very concerned about transitions, what would happen, in certain situations when you're changing broadcasters. And I think it was, as far as I know, mainly a case of, hey, we want to know where, you're our partners, you're spending billions of dollars with us. We want to know what you have in mind. So I was not a party to what was taking place on the side.
Yeah, Andrew, we have Kirk Herbstreit on the pod. I got to ask you about college football. How do you see all this conference stuff winding up?
I don't know how it's going to settle, other than I think there's going to be about 50 to 60 teams here in the next couple of years that are going to be in some form of SEC, Big Ten, and whatever's left of the Pac-12, ACC, Big 12. That's what it feels like. And I don't know if they're going to create a new division, like a college football playoff division, and whoever doesn't make that cut, it's 60, just stays, currently where they are. But that's what it feels like to me, especially now that we have the 12-team playoff. It just seems like we're more and more going towards that model. And I think Notre Dame will stay out of joining any conference. It would obviously make sense now, especially with 12 teams. They're not going to want to join a conference and share that potential revenue. So I don't know when it's going to kind of next domino is going to fall. I see the Big Ten adding another couple teams. The SEC, I think, will do the same. And then at some point, I don't know what's going to happen with what's left of the Pac-12, what's left of the Big 12 and the ACC, but we're going to get to about 60 teams would be my guess.
Now, Kirk, I want to ask you a question, not as a college football analyst, but as a proud Ohio State alum. When the Big Ten expanded to bring in Maryland and Rutgers, did you like that? And then when they expanded to bring in USC and UCLA, do you like that?
Maryland and Rutgers, I think it was just kind of a reaction. I think really you can go all the way back to Penn State, right, with Joe Paterno when they came into the Big Ten. That was the first one. It kind of was a head scratcher, and everybody just has gotten used to that. Maryland and Rutgers, I think everybody was looking at other conferences and the Big Ten trying to create a bigger map with more of a population, trying to get DC and New York. I don't know how that worked out for them or not. And now you have USC and UCLA, and that was a shocker to me as a Big Ten guy, like growing up my whole life in that area and playing at Ohio State. I think anybody would be lying if they didn't say their eyebrows were raised. And, not just what does this mean for the sport, but wow, they're bringing traditional powerhouses from Los Angeles to the Big Ten blueprint. My first reaction is, what does that mean for the Pac-12? Not just what's going to happen in the Big Ten. What does that mean you take USC and UCLA out of the Pac-12. What does that mean for that conference? Already a conference that's kind of wobbling when it comes to the playoff. They've had 2 teams since 2014 even make the playoff. I think their fans have kind of lost some energy, and now they lose USC and UCLA. So I'm concerned about that entire region when it comes to college football. And I was, first couple of days, I was kind of shocked. And then I'm trying to be open-minded through all this. And I am looking forward to seeing USC and UCLA come in to the Big Ten, but I still wonder where we're headed with all this.
Now, Al, I have a couple of other ones for you, but first I had some breaking news that I got in Houston. Fred Godelli was nice enough to let me in part of a graphics meeting. And at the end, they mentioned you drank a V8, which has vegetables in it, Al. Now give us the story on that. Did you actually drink a V8, and what should we know?
Truth be told, I guess the 8 vegetables in V8, the 8 stands for 8 vegetables. I hate all of them by themselves, but if you put them together with enough sugar and enough sodium, and ice, I can down it. But it doesn't. It pales in comparison to Michelle Tafoya once sneaking a Brussels sprout into my mouth. She said, "This is a French fry. Try this." And we were sitting in Baltimore at a bar, and we'd had a couple, and I could taste it right. I knew right away I'd been set up, and I did ingest a little bit of it. So I can't actually say I've never had a vegetable. I've had one morsel of a Brussels sprout and a V8, but that doesn't count, Andrew. I mean, that's a phony deal. You know that.
V8 is much better with vodka, Al,
Al, good idea.
Al, when did that start? When did that start with you in vegetables? Your whole life?
Forever. My parents were 18 when I was born. My mother didn't even know what Dr. Spock was in those years. So I was the kid who just, no way. I want a steak. I want a potato, whatever. Potato doesn't count as a vegetable. It's a starch. And I just pushed it away, and Mom said, fine, keep going. So here I am. What can I tell you? Maybe it's the key to life. Get off the vegetables. You'll be better served.
It might be the key to broadcasting, because Kirk, and I've thought about doing it. Maybe I will. I'm going to give the story away. But Michael Kay, the voice of the Yankees, does not eat vegetables, never has eaten vegetables. Ian Eagle, you all know from CBS and Nets and all he does, Turner, he has never eaten vegetables. So there might be, like, if a young person asks you, how do you make it in this business? How do you become a play-by-play guy? Don't eat vegetables. Simple.
Because Andrew, John, you and I, our generation, all we've come up with is get off the carbs, make sure you're eating healthy, get your vegetables in. Al's like, forget about all that. Forget about it.
It's all nonsense. And by the way, those guys who say they don't, do they have salads? Because once in a while, somebody will say, I don't eat vegetables, and they'll order a salad. I go, what do you think that is? What are you talking about? Come on.
I know. Now, I haven't spent they're been with Michael Kay or Ian Eagle their whole lives, but as far as I know, I believe they have the same criteria as you. But anyway, it's a common thread. If there are any other broadcasters out there, please contact me, because I think there's a nice feature I could do here. But let me ask you this, though. We just talked about your health. You talked earlier about you don't think, at the end of this Amazon deal, as an 11-year deal, that you might not be the play-by-player. What's the criteria for Al Michaels when you say, you know what, this is it for me, I'm going to hang up the headset? What's the criteria that you'll look at when that time comes?
I think I'll know before anybody else does. I think I will. unless I completely, fall off the cliff at some point, God forbid. But you never know what can happen. If I can't get to the place I want to get to in the game as quickly as I have, or as I don't want to say as adroitly, but if I can't get to where I want to go the way I've been doing it for years, I'll know first. I will know first. And I said that to everybody at NBC too a couple of years ago. I said, look, I'm going to know before anybody else knows. Okay. And I don't want to hang on. I'm not going to hang on. I don't want to have anybody ever say, he used to be, he might have been, we remember, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm the first guy who will know, and I'll be out of there in a heartbeat.
Kirk, what's a successful year for you? How are you going to determine success?
We're having fun. I think that's a successful year, because if you're having fun, I think that typically means things are going well. We keep going back to this word chemistry, but I think Al is more than qualified to do his role in the broadcast. I'd like to think with my preparation, I'll be in a position to be qualified to be able to, break the game down. And then I think at the end of the day, I think what I will look back at our year, if we enjoyed the season together as a group, then I think that's going to be, I'm not looking at ratings. I'm not looking at any of that. I'm looking at how did we feel? Because we're probably our hardest critics with each other. How do we feel about what we're doing from 1 week to the next? I think if we can walk out like the way we felt in Houston, we can feel like that every week, and we can high five each other. I'll see you next week, and on to the next game. That would be, I think that would be a big win for us.
How about you, Al? Do you look at things that way?
Well said by Kirk. Yeah. Again, it's a case of, did we deliver on any given night? And also, there's a tendency to sometimes think you're better than you thought you were. I've never let myself go to the point where that was perfect. There was always something you could have done, a few things you could have done that were a little better. And I think that's what has driven me and driven a lot of my partners, and driven Fred Godelli and Drew Esikoff, who I worked with for years. We'd have a bunch of games through our careers where you'd say, hey, that was, we really did a good job tonight, but we can be better next week. So we're always looking, I hate to sound like a coach, we can be better. We got to clean up some stuff. But I think for the most part, again, I go back to, if we're a comfortable listen for the majority of the people who have tuned in, that to me will define success. And, a lot of times, you guys know this as well as anybody, sometimes there's a great game and there's a tendency to tie the game to the broadcast. And sometimes, the game was so good that the broadcast could have been average, but the broadcast seems to be better than it was, and vice versa. Sometimes the game is a stinker, but you really, ratcheted it up to the point where you made it more interesting than the game itself. So that's the essence of this business. It's the spontaneity. It's the, live television is the greatest. And that's why I'm still doing this thing. I mean, it's just it's something that, you feel in your bones. You're not Steven Spielberg on a movie set taking 20 takes. You got one take, you got 3 hours, and away you go. And it's exhilarating.
I have one last food question. I was in the booth down in Houston, got to watch for a minute or two, something, and I didn't ask you after. I didn't get a chance, but I noticed, Al, you eat green grapes during the game, and I was wondering if there was a reason for that, or that was just happenstance, or just something to do with keeping your throat. Is there anything to that, or is that just it was just happened to be what the food was there?
It just happened to be there. I mean, I like grapes, green or red. Grapes are good. Fruit is good. I eat a lot of fruit. Bananas. Also, junior mints. Junior mints are great. And Snackwells, which seem to be harder to find these days. But those, you just need something. I can't eat a sandwich in the middle of the game. But, grapes are a good snack.
Okay,
and healthy too, right?
Yeah, exactly, healthy. I thought there was a reason. We have a lot of young sportscasters who listen. I thought maybe there's a little tip, maybe it keeps your throat moist or something like that. Where
no.
Okay.
You know what's weird? I mean, I drink water and coffee during the game, or occasionally some tea. But I used to drink like diet soda, and somebody said that's terrible for you. And then I found out that Elton John drinks diet soda during his performances, and I got to meet him. about 5 or 6 years ago, and he confirmed it. So I could go back on Diet Coke next week.
Yeah, your old buddy Chris Collinsworth, he could have used some tea on last Sunday night. That was that was tough.
I felt terrible for him too. I know that there's nothing worse than going to a game, and you've got a tinge of laryngitis and you don't feel good to begin with on top of it, but he gutted it out. I felt for him last night.
Hey, Andrew, next time we get Kirk on the pod, we're going to dial in. We're going to hammer him on his diet. Okay. So not today, but next time.
Al Michaels, 77, still throwing 92. I mean, we need to get some help tips here.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Listen, never go to a place where the sign says vegan outside. Never.
Listen, Kirk Herbstreit, Al Michaels, Amazon Prime this year, Thursday night. There's going to be the exclusive. The only way you can watch the game every Thursday is on Amazon Prime. I've said this. I think John kind of agrees. It's hard to imagine the broadcast is not going to be good between Godelli, Michaels, and Herbstreit and the rest of the crew you guys have assembled. And then the question is, hopefully the pipes work and everyone can see it, which I'm sure it will. But we really thank you for joining us, and I wish you a really great season.
Good luck.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Andrew, I greatly enjoyed that. One thing that I did take away from that has nothing with how they answered the questions, but more, they're still a new tandem, a new team that's out there. And they interrupted each other in a good way. They talked with each other. They engaged each other. And I just think people that listen to that kind of don't actually listen to the words as much as like just the way they interacted with each other. And I think they're going to be really, really good on Amazon this year. I think
Herbstreit probably is maybe the best partner Al Michaels could have. Al Michaels is still really good, so there's nothing but Herbstreit, he's very prepared. And this is something that Amazon got, which is kind of rare, right? Herbstreit's 53 and he's at the top of college football. So you bring him in, he's that type of analyst, but he's coming to the NFL hungry. A lot of people can come and you can get guys when they're established and they've done really well and they're kind of resting on their laurels, maybe not working as hard, maybe don't get to the games as early. And that can be a little bit different. You can see how that works out as you go forward. Herbstreit's going in there and he wants to be the best. He said that on the podcast in my story, the long feature. He said that he not only wants to be the best NFL crew. He wants to be the best crew in all of sports. Which I was trying to lead him into saying that again. He sort of like said, "Hey, we talked in Houston." Yeah. I'm trying to have you say it now on the podcast. Same thing. You're like running my little tricks here. I know the answer. I'm trying to get you to say it on the podcast. All right. That's what we do here. That's the thing that when you look at what Marie Donahue, Jared Stacey, what they did in terms of like putting together this team, it was long, arduous. To get Al Michaels, I said this in my story, to get Al Michaels a sign was like the 1980 USA over the USSR. Do you believe in miracles? When he finally actually put his pen to paper, after looking around to see what else was out there. But they got it right. I can't imagine that that's not going to be a really good broadcast from the jump. And so that's very important when you have a new service.
All right. Speaking of Kirk Herbstreit, let's go straight to our call of the week.
Call of the week.
John, our call of the week goes to Kirk Herbstreit. On College Game Day, McAfee makes his debut, but Herbstreit had the analysis that really foreshadowed the whole day. He was talking about Notre Dame versus Marshall, and he had a feeling.
I'm going to tell you something, Pat. Marshall, Notre Dame has that weird September feeling. You tune in the third quarter, and it's like 20-17. What's going on? Marshall can score. From being from West Virginia, they can score.
Now, John, I'm not really into predictions, right? Like you give guys credit for this prediction. People make a million predictions, and you find that what happens with media is that a lot of times they'll just say like the opposite and outlandish things just to get credit. But the thing I like about Herbstreit is that he doesn't do things really for effect. It's just, and obviously where he is, but I think even as he's grown at ESPN, now he's established where he's at the top, but even he's not just said things to get attention, which I think is important for any analyst coming up. Don't just say stuff just to get attention. When you have something different to say it. And look, that's great analysis. And then when it proves to be true and Marshall even won the game, you look very good. So Herbstreit looked very good on what he said on game day last week.
Yeah, and before we sign off, Andrew, I want to give a quick shout out. Joanne Ross, people in the business know exactly who she is. She's been with CBS for 30 years in their ad sales department. She's been running it for a long time. If you've gone to a CBS upfront presentation, she's a veritable star. I mean, she comes out and always has a very funny skit to lead it off. She has always been, for me, a great interview, exceedingly kind and nice. She announced just this week that she is retiring. She's taking on an advisory role as chairman at Paramount Advertising. But what a career that she had. And I just wanted to give her a quick shout out.
Yeah, well, happy trails to Joanne, and hopefully retirement in an advisory role treats her well. And look, we do this every week, but we have to give props to the people who treat us well and who make all these sound effects happen and produce the whole show. That, of course, is AC Wyatt and Chris Mason. And so they do a great job. So we thank them as we do every week. And our call to action, John.
Like and subscribe. Please go 5-star ratings and a nice comment or two. And apparently that really matters. So please do that.
All right. Thanks, guys. And if you want to know how to say our names, we'll maybe put something on Twitter or something trying to explain how to say them. But we appreciate everyone mentioning us.
Thanks, Marshawn.